there are unprecedented events happening across the globe. पहले तो ऐसा लगता था only emerging markets या developing nations में we can see these problems, but अभी even developed markets are having these problems. And if I look at it retrospectively, लास्ट फ्यू ईयर्स में डेवलप मार्केट्स आर द वन जिसमें ज़्यादा प्रॉब्लम दिख रहा है. यू लुक एट यूएस इज फेसिंग मल्टी डेकेडल हाई इन्फ्लेशन. Right, what is the reason for that? We all know the ultra loose monetary policy that they followed during the last 2 years of COVID. Similarly, at UK has been in the news majorly over the last couple of weeks. Right, so they have inflation problem, they have energy crises. Those are different topics, and we can make a different video on those topics, right? Detailed videos. But over the past couple of weeks, the hot news from UK has been regarding, as you all know, the new government that they came up with the mini budget led by Liz Truss, the movement in the bond yields because of the mini budget, and the pension fund crisis. So in this SNS video, the objective is to quickly take you through the sequence of events, what has happened in UK, so that you have an understanding of what has been happening, because a lot of news has been coming out regarding UK, and it has become very difficult to track that. So in this short and brief video, we'll take you through what events have happened in the UK over the past couple of weeks, and the main objective is to keep it simple. So let's dive into it. So what's happening in UK? So basically, this is a very good chart which was shared by James Siegel. So in this, you can basically, this chart summarizes what has happened in the UK over the past couple of weeks. So you can see that it all started at this point when the government came up with the new mini budget, where they announced some tax cuts, some subsidies. Okay, and from that point, the yield shot up because the markets didn't like that. This was the point when Bank of England said that we need to come in and cool the market down. The yield started cooling because of the measures that Bank of England announced. But then again, there were some events like the Bank of England saying that we need to shut down the bond purchase program, which again spooked the markets and the yields have gone up. So this is just a brief gist. This chart encapsulates everything that has happened in the UK very nicely. And as it says, yields are swinging like a pendulum in the UK. So now let's go step by step in how the sequence of events took place in the UK over the past couple of weeks. So the first one, as I said, surprising mini budget by the new government led by Liz Truss. So the major things that were part of the mini budget were tax cuts, and if you interpret it, it was kind of tax cut for the ultra rich, wherein they were reducing it the maximum tax from 45 to 40%. So obviously the people who are in the 45% brackets are the one who are wealthy, right? And if you're reducing their tax, then they are going to increase their spending, which in short, which again will lead to higher inflation, right? So it was defeating the purpose of what the central bank was trying to do, where the central bank is trying to raise the rate in order to control the inflation that is there, multi-decadal high inflation that is there in UK. The other thing which was announced was energy subsidies. So we can understand why energy subsidies, because the energy prices in UK are at multi-decadal highs, and obviously we needed energy subsidies because the common man cannot sustain. But then what happened? That this stand, the mini budget of the UK government, was basically completely opposite of what the central bank was trying to do. This mini budget was going to increase the spending power of the people, going to increase the deficit of the government, which was eventually going to lead to higher inflation, which the central bank was trying to control. So you can say that both the UK government and the central bank were on completely different pages. The markets didn't like this, and they showed this. How do the market show this? They show this through yields. They started dumping bonds, the government bonds, UK government bonds, UK gilts, you called it, right? And the yield started skyrocketing. Now, obviously, now many of you might be confused between this relation. For those who are new in the finance world, right? So, what is the relationship between bond prices and yields? So, basically, those are inversely related, right? Whenever the prices go down, yields will increase. Now, when will the prices go down? You need to understand the supply and demand dynamics. Whenever there is huge demand, prices go up. Whenever there is no demand, prices go down. Similarly with supply, whenever there is high supply, prices will go down because there is a lot of goods. Whenever there is limited supply, the prices will go up. So what happened in this case? People started selling. So there was a lot of supply in the market, and since supply increased, prices went down, and eventually the yields went up. Right? I know this is a bit confusing, but for those who are new, can just rewind this video and listen to it 2 3 times, and they'll understand it, and then they can do their own further research to understand it. But this is a very important concept that you need to understand, because the debt market is the largest market. So now many people might not be doing, but debt market is even much more bigger than the equity market, right, globally. And therefore it's important to know how the debt market functions, and this relationship between price and yields is the most basic one. So yeah, we came to the second step. Mini budget was announced. There was some tax cut subsidies. The market didn't like it, and they showed it through the increase in bond yields. And that is what happened over here. The bond yields increased from 3.8 to almost 5.5 percentage points. Then there were some new players, right? Now you might say कि pension funds का इसमें क्या है? Pension funds are the safe ones, right? They'll invest in very safe assets, but that's not the case. In UK and in many foreign countries, pension funds do invest in risk assets, and risk assets, what I mean is equity markets. In India, it is limited to 15%, but in other markets, the a percentage allocation to equity can be much higher. So what happened is that these pension funds use derivatives. We can discuss this in details, but just to give you a brief overview, they use derivatives to hedge the risk. Like whenever the interest rate goes up, the prices of the bonds go down. And therefore, in order to safeguard themselves from this interest rate movement, they use derivatives. And whenever and because of the sharp movement in the yields, they started facing margin calls. And now when they what they mean with margin calls, they need to deposit more cash in their account. And how will they do that? They'll need to sell some of their holdings. The yields were rising because the market was already selling, right? So how is the pension funds going to sell? So they were finding it very difficult to sell it at a reasonable price, like or they had to sell it at a very discount, which would have been a huge loss, right? So in order to support this, a new player came in. So Bank of England had to enter over here in order to calm down the markets. So what Bank of England did? Simple supply demand dynamics. There was a lot of supply. We'll purchase those bonds in order to reduce the surge in yields, or in order to cap the increase in yields. And that's what they did. They started purchasing bonds in order to cool off the yields. So this is where the peak happened. The Bank of England started purchasing, and then the yields started dropping down. So this also helped the pension funds, right? So yields started dropping down means prices again went up. The pension funds could now unwind some of their assets, right, at a reasonable price, not at a discount, and then satisfy their margin calls. And besides, as the yields start coming down, the margin calls requirement will also go down. So this helped them in both ways. But then there was something new. The yield started going down, but then okay, so this is not something. This U-turn was the government U-turn. What they did, they scrapped the tax cut, and this also actually helped in cooling of the yield. So basically, they faced a lot of pressure from both the uh, people, and the internal people in the government as well, and therefore they had to scrap the tax cut, especially the 45% to 40% tax cut that they had proposed in their mini budget. They scrapped that. So this also helped in cooling of the yields. And then again something happened around October start. The Bank of England said that they're going to shut down the bond buying program. And this again spooked the market, because if they stop buying, there is already the demand is decreasing, and as you know, supply demand dynamics, when the demand starts decreasing, prices again go down. When prices go down, yields started shooting up. So if you see, the yields have been moving like a pendulum in the UK markets, and this has been the sequence of events which has led to this swing. So I hope I was clear. I know there are many concepts in here, like the pension funds, why they got margin calls, what is LDIs, the liability driven investments. These are basically derivatives that the pension funds use in order to hedge the risk that they face because of change in interest rates, inflation, and etc. But we'll cover this in some separate videos. We'll keep it short and simple for now, just to understand what was the sequence of events. Now, as I said, there are many concepts which were new and many might not be aware of. So we would suggest some further readings. Now, being a wealth manager, I obviously need to give some gyan on investments. So an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. So if anyone asks me that, tell me which is the best asset to invest in, this is my only answer to them. At invest in your knowledge, it pays the highest interest. There's no other asset which will give you the highest return. So now just quickly go through some of the topics that you can read on further. So for LDIs, you can read this interesting PDF. It's a good article, basically giving an introduction of why pension funds needed, how pension funds in the UK work, how it is used for hedging, and all those. So for those who are interested to understand it in deep, they can refer this. I've attached the link as well. Now, again, if you want to read more about the pension fund crisis and what the fuss is all about, this is a news article you can go through. Then, mini budget. Like, I didn't touch much in details about what was in the mini budget, what changes were made in the U turn, right? So, for all those things, details like what was on corporate tax, on the individual tax, subsidies, what all was introduced, what all was changed, all those, you can refer this article, beautiful article by BBC. Last, this is a brief video covering in detail what happened in the UK over the past couple of weeks. You can refer that as well. A beautiful video. Thank you for listening in. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you very much.